Hello, and welcome to our virtual program. We will begin in just a moment, and you can turn on captions in the toolbar. Just as some ground rules, your microphone has been muted by us. However, you can use the chat or the Q&A function to ask questions during the program. We do ask that you please be respectful when making comments, and I am already sharing my screen, and later on we will be viewing a video. Okay. Hi, and welcome to Adinkra Stamps. My name is Anna Kopinska, and this is really a passion of mine ever since I learned about Adinkra in my art history classes. And I am so excited to share that with you all today. So, before we get started into talking about what Adinkra are, I wanted to really kind of highlight how we communicate ideas. We use words, right, when talking and writing, but sometimes pictures are actually worth 1,000 words. And in the ancient times, we used pictures as stand-ins for words. Then we found out that we could paint scenes and draw other things. So photography came later, and we got to take pictures of just about everything that we could want. And now we're back to using symbols like emojis to express our emotions. I'm sure you have used an emoji or two yourself. However, Adinkra are a different way to communicate language visually. Um, they were created by the Akan people of Ghana in West Africa, and each Adinkra symbol represents an idiom, and it has a specific meaning associated with it. Adinkra are used on many things, such as jewelry. Um, you can see this symbol of the two Siamese crocodiles. Um, Forgive my pronunciation of this, but it's Funtun Funefu Denkiem Funefu, which means Siamese crocodiles. The crocodiles share one stomach, and yet they fight over food. And this popular symbol is a reminder that infighting and tribalism are harmful to all who engage in it. We also see adinkra on furniture, or adinkra that are inspired by furniture. This stool is a king's stool, and there's a symbol specifically for royal authority that is based on the design of such thrones. However, the thrones can also incorporate adinkra symbols as well. So here's an example of the king's stool where the base is carved with the same Siamese crocodiles we saw earlier. And here's yet another stool with an Adinkra symbol carved into the base. This is Nkinkyim or twisting, which is a symbol of initiative and versatility, which I think is a very good trait for a king to have. So you can see how these symbols can kind of represent who is sitting on the chair and what they are supposed to represent. Adinkra are also found on architecture. Here you can see a number of symbols. There's Mframadan, that one right there, which means wind-resistant house, um, which represents like strength and stability, which would be a very good thing for a hotel to have. And here are more examples of Adinkra in architecture. You can see the Adinkra here on the walls. But you can especially find Adinkra on cloth. Adinkra is the name given to the colorful hand-stamped and hand-embroidered cloths used for mourning and other special occasions by the Akan people of Ghana. And they're also in the Ivory Coast as well. The Adinkra symbols are printed onto these cloths. They were once used exclusively for mourning, but now the symbols express the wearer's feelings and sentiment about the occasion. So before they used to express the wearer's feelings and sentiment about the deceased person, but now the symbols can convey messages such as hope, peace, bravery, faith, and love, and other special occasions such as weddings and birthdays. Um, I want to share a funny story that my art history professor shared with us. She was actually invited to a funeral in Ghana, um, and one of the attendees was wearing um, a Adinkra cloth that apparently was so egregious and so um, insulting to the family that they were kicked out of the funeral, and there was a great to-do about it. So, Adinkra are symbols that convey meaning, and that meaning is widely known by the Akan people. Adinkra literally means saying goodbye or farewell in the language of the Akan people, who comprise about one half of the population of Ghana. Adinkra cloth symbols have been in use for hundreds of years and constitute an ancient African writing system of verbal and visual imagery. The symbols are figurative and stylized geometric images that embody poetic messages. Some of the symbols express the legendary history of the Akan people, and others are cultural metaphors and aphorisms about philosophy, myths, legends, beliefs, rituals, and social values. They contain multi-layered meanings and profound truths. They provide a framework of moral virtues and lessons for the good life. They epitomize the Ashanti worldview and their quest for truth and righteousness in the world. The stamp designs are made from carved calabash, which are dipped into a special made ink called Adinkra Duro, which means Adinkra medicine. The designs are then stamped onto a variety of colored cotton cloths to be worn for all occasions. So here you can see another image. Typically, Adinkra have this field grid onto which they are stamped, and you can see different Adinkra fill the grid, the space in the grid with which they occupy. And together, all of these symbols represent meanings which people recognize as you're wearing the cloth. In order to put Adinkra symbols on cloth, stamps are carved usually from calabash, which is a type of gourd. On the left, you can see what the gourd looks like, and on the right, you can see the multitude of stamps used in stamping Adinkra onto cloth. And Adinkra ink is typically made from the bark of the body tree after boiling for several days. So first the ink starts in a big pot like this, but as it boils and boils, more moisture evaporates from it, and eventually you get black ink. However, today, instead of using calabash, we will use rubber. This is Speedy Car from Speedball, and it's fairly easy to use. So if you're following along at home, you can draw out your design. You can choose an Adinkra design or make your own. Um, my uh, assistant, my chat moderator, Jessica, is going to drop some links in the chat for Adinkra symbols, adinkra.org and adinkrasymbols.org. And those are great resources to um, find an Adinkra symbol that resonates with you. Be mindful that the stamp design will be the inverse of what the stamp actually looks like, so it's best to avoid letters or numbers. Or if you do use them, make sure that they are backwards. This is not an Adinkra symbol, but it kind of shows you the inverse is going to print onto the paper of what your stamp is actually carved. Once we are done drawing out our design, we are going to move on to carving. So using the carving tool, you will carve away what you want to be white. In order to carve, you can press firmly into the rubber with the sharp end of the tool, push along the line you want to carve, and then lift up when you come to a stopping point. It's kind of like digging. Usually, it's best to start carving out an outline and then going in and clearing out the rest of the blank parts. However, if it's your first time carving, try carving out the blank parts first to get an idea for how carving feels and works. Some safety features. This image features linoleum instead of our speedy carve, but I do want you to take a look at how the tool is being used because that is going to stay the same regardless of the material you're carving. You always, always, always want to carve away from your body. You can rotate your speedy carve as many times as you want to, but make sure that you are carving away from your body. Do not put your fingers in front of the blade. You can see in this image that the dominant hand is holding the tool while the non-dominant hand is holding down the carving material to the table right underneath. You should never put your fingers in front of the blade. That's how you get hurt. And if it's hard to carve and you find yourself putting in a lot of force and effort, do not try to force the blade through. Usually this happens because you have dug the blade in too deep, so you can try to pull it back and carve at a more shallow depth. Once your stamp is carved, you can move on to the third step, which is inking. You will dab on the ink and then press the stamp firmly onto the surface. And I do mean dab, move it in up and down motions. If you drag the ink across, it will usually create some texture, and that texture will then transfer over onto your paper as well. Once you have dabbed the ink on, you can press the stamp down firmly onto the paper, making sure not to move the stamp while holding it down. You can repeat the dabbing and stamping as desired. So, remember that Adinkra is traditionally done over and over on a grid pattern to fill the entire fabric with pattern. And now it's time for a video demonstration.
Hi, and welcome to Adinkra Stamps, the virtual edition. Today we will be going over some examples of Adinkra symbols and how you can stamp them on your own. We will also go over a carving demonstration. So, let's get started. Our first example of an Adinkra stamp is Fafanto, which means butterfly. I hope that you can see in your image, but the actual outline itself has been carved away. So, when stamped, this looks something like this, where the entire stamp is black except for the outline, which has been carved away, that is white, the same color as the paper. The Fafanto symbolizes tenderness, gentleness, honesty, and fragility. Next up, we've got two symbols. One, which is Sesa wo Isaban, I change my life, which is a symbol of transformation. We also have Gyawu Atiko, which is a war hero's hairstyle that is symbolizing bravery. So the two combined can create a beautiful field of Adinkra stamps. And together they create a message that change is brave and that you need bravery to change and transform. So what do you need to carve your own Adinkra stamp? Well, if you have a Plano library card, you can check out our stamping steam kit, and everything comes in it for free upon checkout. It includes an ink pad, a speedball carver, the actual easy carve material that we'll be using to carve the stamp out of, and you would supply your own pencil and paper. However, if you want to continue making lino cutting a hobby that you pursue on your own, you may also want to purchase some block printing ink, as well as a brayer. For my Adinkra symbol, I have chosen the Sankofa, which is a goose looking back and is meant to be assigned to go back and retrieve it, honoring your own roots and honoring history as well. So you can see I've printed out two versions of the image. One which is the correct way to actually draw and see the symbol, and one which is the inverse. So I flipped it vertically and got this one. Because stamping is going to stamp the inverse of the actual design you draw, I wanted to have the inverse of the final image so that I knew what to draw without doing any mental work. Looking at the inverse image, I'm going to start tracing the design onto my Easy Carve. Don't worry if your final product isn't exactly like the image. We're trying to get a close representation, and with Adinkra symbols, they are always slightly different. This is the Speedball Carver. It has a red barrel, which has a cap on the end, which when you twist to loosen, has 5 different cutting blades inside of it. Be careful, the blades are sharp. Each blade has both the actual pointy end as well as the U-shaped side, which is going to go into the chuck. The chuck loosens, and as it does, the two parts inside of it start to separate. And as they separate, this is where you will put the U shape of the blade into the slot created by the separation of the two parts. To start off with, I'm going to select the thin, small V-shaped tool. This is very good for outlines and carving away small areas. I'm going to start by carving away the small outline of the shape itself, and then I am going to go back with some of my other larger tools to carve away the majority of the piece. When you are carving, you want to carve away what you want to be white. Press firmly into the rubber with the sharp end of the tool and push along the line you want to carve. When you are ready, lift up as you come to a stopping point. It's kind of like digging. When you are carving, you want to make sure that your fingers are never in front of the blade. They should always be to the side or behind the blade. Remember, the blades are very sharp and the rubber is very soft. If you find yourself having to push too hard, it may be because you have carved too deeply into the block itself. If that happens, take the blade back and try to carve at a more shallow depth instead of so deeply. When you are working with curves, try to make sure that you are moving the block instead of the blade itself. Next, I'm going to carve away most of the rest of the piece. So I'm going to switch blades from this small one to a larger one. So I'm going to loosen the chuck, get my blade out, and use the deeper V. And again, turn the chuck to tighten. And now I'm ready to carve. It's time to change out the blade again. So I'm going to loosen the chuck, retrieve the blade, and change it out for one with a wider U. Tighten it again. The reason why I'm changing to a wider U is because the V will leave a lot of mountains and valleys in the carving, but a U will make the peaks a little less. This will give us less chatter in the final product. Chatter is the little leftover dots that you intended to carve away. Next, I'm going to stamp the Adinkra symbol that I just carved along with another one. Traditionally, Adinkra is stamped with multiple symbols. So you can usually do these in a grid pattern or stamp them next to each other in lines. I'm going to do a grid pattern, and I've already laid out 3 small dots on my paper to kind of indicate where the grid will be. So I'm going to use my ink pad and dab it onto my Sankofa until I am seeing pretty good coverage of the entire goose. And then I will stamp. I'm seeing that I could have carved away some more of the chatter, but we'll keep going. And now the other stamp. When you are applying the ink, you want to make sure that you are dabbing in an up and down motion, as opposed to smearing the ink onto the stamp. And there you have it. We now have our own carved Adinkra stamp that we can use to create beautiful works of art of Adinkra symbols or put on stationery and do whatever else you would do with a stamp.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, you can look at your own Adinkra symbols on either adinkra.org or adinkrasymbols.org. And um, you can also use the Plano Public Library stamping kit to make your own Adinkra or any kind of stamp that you would like. Other resources that you might want to use are Udemy, which comes free with your Plano Public Library card. Udemy is a great video library with lots of tutorials for different projects available. Um, yeah. Are there any questions at this time? If you do have questions later on, you can always feel free to reach out to me. My email is annak@plano.gov. And if you have questions about Adinkra or about our stamping kit or anything else, I would be happy to answer. With that, I would like to thank you for coming to our virtual program, and we hope to see you in the library soon.